They say when the sky falls, you don't run, you brace for impact. That's what we did. On the dying world of Serath, we didn't cry, we screamed. Our cities were burning, our skies choked with ash. We sent distress signals on every frequency, every protocol known to the galaxy. We weren't proud anymore. We begged. We pleaded. Please, someone, anyone, save us. The Galactic Council ignored us. The Virex Empire said we weren't strategically valuable. The Kalari called it an internal conflict. The Aztol simply replied, "Extinction is part of natural balance." We watched our children starve, our warriors fall, and our oceans turn black. You have to understand. We were once proud. We were inventors, artists, thinkers. We were peaceful. Too peaceful. When the Skarn invaded, we were soft targets. They didn't come with warnings. They came with fire. A species bred for war, wrapped in armor and hate. We tried to reason. We offered land, tribute, even slaves. They didn't want any of that. They wanted domination. They wanted the end of Serath. We were losing. Fast. Then, one day, in the static of our last-ditch broadcast, a voice cut through. Not mechanical, not translated. Human. Rough, accented, and full of something we hadn't heard in a long time. "Hey, we got your message. This is Captain Ava Morgan, Earth Defense Command. We're coming." We thought it was a trick. A lie. Humanity? The backwater species from Sol 3? The same ones the Council laughed at for being too emotional, too aggressive. Unrefined. They didn't even have seats in the high courts. They were nobodies. But a week later, we saw the skies part. A fleet unlike anything we'd ever seen broke orbit. They didn't fly with elegance or beauty like the Kalari. Their ships looked like blunt fists of steel, bristling with guns and armor plating. No shiny crests, no banners, just one symbol stamped across their hulls. A red and white planet with a ring of stars. Earth had come. At first, we didn't know what to make of them. They weren't diplomats. They didn't wear robes. They wore dark combat suits, scarred with battles from other wars we never heard about. They didn't speak of treaties or peace. They asked one question. Where's the enemy? Captain Morgan herself landed in the ruins of what used to be our capital. Her boots crushed bones as she stepped through the smoke. She didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She looked at our elders, nodded once, and said, "We're not here to save you. We're here to fight beside you." That night, the Serath saw something we hadn't seen in years, hope. It wasn't just their weapons. It was the way they fought, like cornered beasts. They didn't retreat. They advanced with fire in their eyes and fury in their hearts. And when a Skarn warlord tried to ambush their camp, the humans laughed as they tore him to pieces. One of our scouts said he saw a human soldier pull a burning flag from the rubble and kiss it. We asked him why. He said, "Because we've been where you are, and no one came for us. That's why we're here." That was just the beginning. The humans didn't bring politics. They brought vengeance. They didn't ask for payment. They asked for revenge. And something told us we were going to give it to them. The first time we truly saw what the humans were capable of, it wasn't on the battlefield. It was in the ruins of our hospitals. We had long stopped trying to heal the wounded. There were too many. Supplies were gone. Hope was gone. Our medics worked with splinters and herbs, barely able to stop the pain, let alone save lives. When the humans saw our injured, they didn't shake their heads or look away. They went to work like machines, fast, focused, angry. Their medics were soldiers, too. They treated burns with sprays that hissed and cooled instantly. They stopped bleeding in seconds. They lifted screaming children onto stretchers and whispered things we didn't understand, but the tone said everything. "You're going to make it." One of them, a rough-looking man with a shaved head and tattoos of wolves on his arms, picked up a boy with half his leg missing. He didn't flinch. He didn't look disgusted. He just wrapped the stump and said, "You're a tough little bastard, you know that?" The boy didn't understand the words, but he stopped crying. It wasn't just care, it was presence. Humanity made us feel like we mattered again, that we weren't just the dying remnants of a forgotten species, that we were worth saving. When the Skarn attacked our southern ridge, the humans were ready. They had fortified it in just 3 days. We thought it was madness, rushing to build trenches, deploy heavy guns, set up command posts. But when the first wave of Skarn came over the hills, it became clear. The humans wanted them to come. They waited in silence, no ceremonial horns, no speeches, just steady breathing. Then the moment the Skarn came into range, all hell broke loose. Turrets screamed, rockets screamed louder, and the humans, they roared. Not in fear, in challenge, in hunger. I saw a unit of 5 humans hold a bridge against 30 Skarn. 5. They didn't retreat. They fought like rabid creatures, backs to each other, covering every angle, moving like one mind. One was shot through the stomach. He didn't even stop, just yelled, "I ain't got time to bleed," and kept firing. Captain Morgan stood on a hilltop, calm, commanding, her armor dusted in ash. She didn't shout. She gave orders like a machine, eyes always forward. When a Skarn transport tried to flank us, she personally led the charge that blew it sky high. Later that night, she called a council of our surviving commanders. She didn't wait to be invited. She entered our chamber like she belonged there, like this was her war now too. She rolled out a tactical map and said, "This is how we break their back. You want to live? Follow my lead." Our generals bristled. They didn't like her tone. But what choice did we have? We were a breath away from extinction. So we listened. And then we watched, amazed, confused, and maybe a little afraid, as the humans began to plan not just to defend, but to attack. They spoke of guerrilla warfare, shock raids, and something called napalm. Their weapons didn't just kill, they sent messages. Messages of defiance. Messages that said, "You don't own this planet yet." In the darkness of that same night, I found one of the human soldiers sitting alone by the fire, sharpening a blade that looked far too brutal to be anything but personal. I asked him why he came. Why Earth cared. He looked up at me, eyes hollow and burning at the same time. And he said something I'll never forget. "We came because we heard your scream, and no one should ever die screaming alone." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid of the Skarn, but because, for the first time in years, I felt something deep in my bones. We might win this. The humans didn't rest. While we mourned, they trained. While we buried our dead, they cleaned their rifles. And while we questioned our place in the universe, they prepared to take back what was stolen. The plan was reckless, some said suicidal, but the humans didn't flinch. Captain Morgan called it a hit to the gut. A full-scale strike against the Skarn's main supply fortress nestled in the Razik canyons. It was heavily fortified, guarded by plasma turrets, minefields, and a perimeter of bone-armored Skarn elites. No species had ever taken it. The Galactic Council once labeled it impenetrable. The humans laughed when they heard that. "They said the same thing about Normandy," one of them muttered, loading his rifle. We didn't know what that meant, but it sounded like defiance. It sounded like victory. For 3 nights, the humans moved like ghosts through the canyon ridges. Silent. Focused. We watched through binoculars as they scaled cliffs with nothing but rope and gloves, planted charges in enemy convoys, and slit throats in the dark without a single scream. They didn't just fight, they hunted. By the 4th night, the skies exploded. The assault began with thunder, literally. The humans unleashed something called a shock barrage, a storm of sonic detonators that shook the canyon walls and scrambled Skarn sensors. Then came the gunships, black, fast, shaped like predatory birds. They descended with screaming engines, unloading squads of armed humans into the heart of the fortress. And that's when we saw what they really were. Not just soldiers, monsters. Beautiful, terrifying monsters of war. They fought like creatures possessed, firing as they ran, screaming insults and rally cries in their harsh tongue. I watched one charge a Skarn brute nearly twice his size, dodging its blade and jamming a grenade into its mouth before diving behind cover. The explosion painted the walls red. We joined the fight, of course. We fought beside them, inspired, driven. But even in the chaos, we knew. This was their war now. Captain Morgan led the charge into the command tower. Our intel said the Skarn warlord, Gorthak the Butcher, was inside. No one had seen him in person, only heard his voice in propaganda broadcasts, a voice like gravel grinding on steel. She didn't hesitate. Her squad breached the entrance in a burst of fire and smoke, and for a long, agonizing moment, all we heard over the comms was static, then gunfire, then silence. Minutes passed like hours. Then her voice came through, raspy, bloodied, but unmistakably smug. "Target neutralized. Fortress is ours." We cheered until our voices cracked. That night, for the first time in years, the skies above Serath were quiet. No Skarn patrols, no bombers, just stars. We gathered in the remains of the fortress, turning what was once a symbol of our defeat into our new command center. The humans walked among us, bruised, limping, smeared in blood, and grinning. They celebrated not with parades or formalities, but with firelight, music from strange devices, and something they called whiskey. They offered us drinks. We hesitated. Then one of our soldiers, a young girl named Valen, took a sip and made a face like she'd swallowed acid. The humans laughed, and for the first time, so did we. But not all was joy. Captain Morgan stood apart from the others, her armor dented, her eyes darker than before. I approached her, unsure of what to say. She looked at the fortress walls, now scorched with battle and still stained with Skarn blood, and whispered, "This isn't over. It's just the first punch." I asked her if she believed we could truly win. She turned to me, eyes fierce, jaw clenched. "Win? Oh, we're not here to win. We're here to make them wish they never heard your name." And in that moment, I believed her. I believed that maybe, just maybe, humanity wasn't just here to help us survive. They were here to teach us how to fight back. The war changed after that night. Word spread like wildfire. Not just through our ranks, but across the stars. The fortress at Razik, the impenetrable stronghold, had fallen. And it wasn't the Kalari or the Virex who did it. It was a species the Council once dismissed as too young, too wild, too primitive. Humans. Whispers reached even the Skarn. For the first time, we saw hesitation in their attacks. Their strikes were less organized. Their patrols moved more cautiously. They had learned fear. But fear doesn't stop a war. It only delays the next strike. The humans knew that. While we dared to breathe and believe again, they worked. Day and night. They built up the fortress into a forward base. Their engineers, covered in grime and sweat, repurposed Skarn technology with terrifying creativity. Their scientists took apart enemy weapons like puzzles and rebuilt them into nightmares. But it was more than their tech. It was the way they thought. Humans didn't believe in fair fights. They believed in winning. By any means necessary. They taught us how to rig traps using scrap metal and fuel canisters, how to camouflage our movements, how to strike and vanish before the enemy could react. They even showed us how to use sound, playing old Earth battle chants from hidden speakers at night to mess with the Skarn's senses. One track played what they called metal music. We had no idea what it meant, but it shook the ground and made the Skarn flinch. We watched, We listened, and slowly we learned. But not everyone was grateful. One evening, in the mess hall carved out of an old Skarn barracks, a fight broke out. A Serath elder, Counselor Halvek, confronted Captain Morgan. His voice echoed across the hall, loud and bitter. "You do not belong here! This is not your war! You humans fight like beasts and call it glory! You do not understand honor!" The room froze. Soldiers, both human and Serath, paused mid-bite, mid-sentence. Morgan stood slowly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't reach for her weapon. Instead, she walked right up to Halvek, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, "Your honor got you slaughtered. Your pride got your people nearly wiped out. We're not here for medals. We're here so your children don't grow up in chains." Halvek stared at her for a long time. Then, without a word, he left. Later, I found Morgan outside, staring up at the stars. She had a bottle in her hand, half empty. "I'm not here to be liked," she muttered. "I'm here because someone has to be the bastard willing to do what no one else will." I didn't argue, because deep down, we all knew she was right. The next day, we launched another offensive, this time against a Skarn prison outpost. One of ours had been captured during the Razik raid, a Serath scout named Juno. Smart, brave, barely 20 cycles old. The humans didn't even hesitate. They planned the extraction like clockwork. No drawn-out strategy meetings, no long debates. Just action, fast, brutal, precise. I was there when we breached the outer wall. We found Juno in a cage, barely conscious, tortured, beaten, left as a message. Morgan knelt beside her, cut the bindings herself, and whispered, "You're not alone." Not anymore. But what stayed with me wasn't the rescue. It was what happened after. The humans didn't just evacuate. They burned the outpost to the ground. They didn't just kill the guards. They left one alive, wounded, tied to a post. A message carved into the metal above him in 3 languages. "We came for one. Imagine what happens when we come for all." That was the night I realized something terrifying and beautiful. The humans weren't just helping us win. They were turning us into something new. Not peaceful, not proud, relentless. And maybe, for the first time in our history, that's what we needed to be. The deeper we pushed into Skarn territory, the more we saw of what they'd done to our world, and the more we understood why the humans fought the way they did. Villages turned to ash, forests reduced to blackened toothpicks, and bodies, so many bodies, not just soldiers, civilians, elders, infants, entire bloodlines wiped out and strung up like trophies. It changed us. There was a time our warriors took prisoners, a time we offered mercy. That time was over. The humans never said it aloud, but we understood. Every atrocity we discovered hardened us, and behind every brutal retaliation was the ghost of something they never spoke about, something that had once been done to them. We started asking questions, not just about tactics or tech, but about Earth, about humanity. "What happened to your people?" I asked one night, as Captain Morgan stared into a flickering campfire. She didn't answer at first, just sipped her drink, jaw tight. Then she said, "We used to fight each other. For color, for power, for dirt. Millions died. We built bombs that could wipe out cities. We called it progress, and then something worse came along. Something that didn't care who we were, just that we weren't them." Her eyes glinted, not from the firelight, but from something deeper. Pain. Memory. An alien fleet landed in South America, took half the continent in weeks. We begged the galaxy for help. The council laughed, called it a localized dispute. So we did what we always do. We got angry, and we hit back harder. She leaned forward. We lost billions, but in the end, We drove them out. Not because we were stronger, but because we refused to die. I didn't ask anything else that night, but I understood her better. The humans didn't fight to win. They fought because they remembered what it felt like to be abandoned. We mirrored that rage in the next operation. A coordinated triple strike, 3 Skarn communication nexuses spread across the northern wastes. We struck at dusk, splitting our forces and trusting the humans' doctrine of speed and shock. I led one of the teams alongside a human called Reyes. Quiet man, scar above his brow, spoke only when necessary. But when he did, people listened. His eyes never stopped moving, always scanning, always calculating. We breached the first nexus and found the command deck crawling with Skarn. The Serath would have fallen back, regrouped. Reyes kicked open the door and opened fire like he was chasing death itself. We followed. What unfolded wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. Every Serath soldier who fought beside him became something else that day. Faster, meaner, like his fury infected the rest of us. We didn't stop until the last Skarn dropped. And when Reyes walked over to the console and set the charges, he didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He just said, "One less voice for them to scream orders through." All 3 nexuses were destroyed by dawn. The Skarn retaliated hard. An orbital strike wiped out one of our forward camps. Dozens dead. Mostly Serath. A few humans. One of them was barely 18. A girl named Lexi, who had drawn flowers on her helmet and always sang off-key during patrols. Captain Morgan stood in the center of the crater where the camp used to be, holding the melted remains of that same helmet. No one dared speak. She turned to her second-in-command and said, "No more defensive operations. We take the fight to their heart." "Are you sure?" he asked. "That's deep Skarn territory. They'll expect it." "I want them to expect it," she replied. "I want them to wait for it. I want them to fear the sound of engines in their skies and boots on their soil." She paused. "And I want every Serath fighter with us when we do it." It was bold. Insane, even. But it sparked something in us. We weren't survivors anymore. We were warriors. And under the banner of a species we once thought primitive, we prepared to march straight into the fire. Because this wasn't just about saving our world anymore. It was about making the galaxy remember who we are, and never again dare to forget. The march to the Skarn capital was unlike anything Serath had ever done before. We were not a people of long campaigns. Our wars had always been sharp, defensive, brief. Before the humans came, we had never crossed into enemy lands willingly. Now, with fire in our chests and steel at our backs, we marched into the black heart of our oppressors. And we didn't march alone. Humans led the way. Their gunships hovered low above our columns. Their tanks, ugly, heavy beasts of metal, crushed through forests and mountains like nature itself had surrendered to their fury. Their soldiers didn't just walk, they stormed. Every bootstep was a promise. "We are coming for you." And yet, despite the power in our hands, the weight of the journey began to take its toll. We lost people along the way, ambushes, traps, drones dropping silent death from high clouds. The Skarn were scared, but they were not weak. They were cornered animals, and they lashed out with everything they had. One night, after we buried 7 more of our own, I found Reyes again. He sat under the shattered canopy of a dead jungle, cleaning his rifle. His hands were stained, but steady. "You ever think about quitting?" I asked him. He looked up, raised one brow. "Quitting," he repeated, like the word was in a foreign language. "I mean, walking away, saying enough." He didn't smile. He didn't blink. "I did. Once. Years ago," he said quietly. "Watched a village burn because I hesitated, because I thought maybe peace was still possible. You only have to make that mistake once." He went back to cleaning, his voice calm, hollow. Since then, I keep going, because if I stop, they win. That was the human way, I realized. They weren't driven by victory. They were driven by memory. Every lost friend, every wasted piece, every betrayal burned into them like a brand. They carried their past into battle like armor, and that's why they never broke. The next day, we reached the outskirts of the Skarn capital. It was a towering hive of metal and fire, surrounded by walls pulsing with defensive energy. Drones circled like vultures. Cannon towers watched from every spire. It looked impenetrable, even more than the fortress at Razik. Our generals hesitated. Captain Morgan didn't. She gathered us in the shadows of the ridge and laid out the plan. 2 teams. One will draw their fire. Loud, messy, suicidal enough to scare them into overcommitting their forces. The other, us, will cut through the old waste tunnels underneath and gut their command. Someone laughed nervously. Who's volunteering for the distraction? Morgan's eyes narrowed. We're not asking for volunteers. She turned to the map and pointed. Reyes, your unit leads the flank. Make noise. Lots of it. Reyes nodded. No questions. She looked to me. You're with me. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. We moved at dusk. Reyes's team hit first. Explosions, artillery, screeching gunships slicing through the smoke. It was chaos. Beautiful chaos. The Skarn rushed to defend their walls, diverting every drone, every scout, every living soldier they had to push back the main force. They never saw us slip beneath. The tunnels were ancient, forgotten. Ruins from a time before even the Skarn. Morgan led from the front, her rifle always ready, eyes scanning every dark corner. We passed bones, rusted metal, and corpses too alien to name. By the time we reached the central power core, the capital above was burning. And yet, despite the smoke, the explosions, the madness, we heard the Skarn warlord before we saw him. His voice echoed through the chamber, low, guttural, cruel. You bring insects to challenge my empire? This is your rebellion? He stepped from the shadows, massive and armored, his body pulsing with energy. He was at least twice Morgan's size, a living weapon. But Morgan didn't back down. She lifted her rifle and said calmly, "No. This is your punishment." Then she fired. What followed wasn't a duel. It was a reckoning. And as the world above trembled, we knew. The final battle had begun. The warlord didn't die easy. Morgan's first shot hit him clean in the shoulder. Any other creature would have dropped. He stumbled, grunted, then laughed, deep and guttural, the sound echoing through the chamber like a drum of death. You think your little toys can stop me? He snarled, stepping forward, tearing the armor plating from his own wound like it was paper. You've brought fire, yes, but I am the storm. He charged. Morgan didn't flinch. She ducked low, rolled to the side, and fired again. The shot pinged off the warlord's leg armor, barely slowing him. He swung a massive blade, thick as a man's torso, cleaving through ancient stone pillars like they were dust. We scattered. The fight was chaos. Close. Brutal. No elegance. Morgan fought like she had nothing left to lose. We joined in, circling, shooting, dodging, but nothing seemed to stop him. Bullets sparked off his hide. Explosives staggered him, but only barely. The warlord was built for this, born for this, and he knew it. You bring cowards and scavengers to face me, he spat, swatting a Serath soldier against the wall with one backhand. You beg for help from apes who think pain is power. You are nothing. Morgan didn't respond. Instead, she signaled us to fall back. The warlord advanced, towering, grinning, until his foot stepped down and clicked. The mine we'd planted took half his leg off. He howled in fury, smoke pouring from his ruined armor. As he fell to one knee, Morgan walked forward. Calm, slow, the barrel of her rifle glowing from heat. She didn't gloat. She didn't speak. She just fired 3 more times. Chest, neck, then right between the eyes. The warlord collapsed like a tower of meat and steel. Finally, still. Silence returned. All around us, the chamber flickered with dying lights and sputtering energy. We were breathing hard, bleeding, shaken. But it was over. We'd done it. But the humans weren't celebrating. Morgan turned to her comm, voice urgent. "Reyes, report!" Nothing. Static. Her jaw clenched. She tried again. "Reyes, do you copy?" Finally, a reply came through, broken and strained. "Captain, flank compromised. They pulled back, circled us. Not many left. But we held the gate. You're clear." Then nothing but silence. Morgan's face hardened, but she didn't break. She just closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and turned to us. "Arm the core. Now." The Serath engineer with us hesitated. "If we blow the core from here, the entire capital—" "Everything goes," Morgan cut in. "That's the point. We take out the command, the factories, the breeding pits, the war archives. We don't cripple them. We erase them." Her voice shook for a moment. "Reyes gave us this shot. We finish it." The engineer nodded. It took less than 2 minutes. Explosives were set along the reactor lines. Once triggered, we'd have 5 minutes to escape. We moved fast, lungs burning, wounded limping, carrying those who couldn't walk. We emerged from the tunnels into chaos, fires roaring across the city, Skarn scrambling like insects with no queen, and over it all, humans, still fighting, still advancing, covered in soot and blood, eyes wild with defiance. We reached the evac point. A human dropship hovered low, doors open, engines shaking the ground. As we boarded, Morgan turned back one last time. She stared at the capital, at the towers we'd once feared, now crumbling. Then she pulled the trigger on the detonator. The explosion wasn't fire, it was light, blinding, burning, beautiful. A mushroom of energy ripped through the sky, swallowing everything. The Skarn capital, once the symbol of their rule, the heart of their pride, was gone in a single flash. The dropship rattled in the shockwave. But we held on. Below us, the world shifted. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. For the first time, they were running. And we were no longer the ones crying for help in the void. We were the ones they feared was coming next. The skies of Serath were different now. Not from the ash. They still carried soot from 1,000 fires, from cities burned and forests lost. But something deeper had changed. The air no longer trembled with helplessness. It thrummed with rage, pride, defiance. The galaxy had turned its back on us, but humanity had turned to face the storm, and brought us back with them. After the fall of the Skarn capital, their empire cracked like glass. What had seemed invincible was suddenly exposed. Their fleets fractured. Their warlords turned on each other. Some fled into deep space. Others tried to regroup. But it was too late. We were no longer prey. The humans knew how to dismantle an empire. They'd done it before, on their own world, in the ruins of their own history. They struck infrastructure, severed supply lines, intercepted comms. But they also did something else, something the galaxy had long forgotten. They broadcasted truth. From captured satellites and jury-rigged transmitters, Morgan's team released hours of footage, images of Skarn atrocities, of broken cities, tortured civilians, and the bodies of children. And alongside it, they showed what the Serath and humans had done in return. The resistance, the fire, the fight. They titled the broadcast, "You Ignored the Cry. Now hear the war cry." It went viral across every known network. Even the Kalari, long considered the most passive race in the galaxy, issued a statement of regret for their silence. The Virex offered weapons in solidarity, but the offer was declined. Morgan's exact words? "We don't need charity from cowards." The Serath rallied like never before. Clans that had hidden underground emerged to fight. Exiles returned from outer colonies. Even former Skarn slaves, genetically altered for servitude, turned against their masters and joined our ranks. And always, the humans were there, teaching us how to be ruthless, how to be unstoppable. I remember one moment, just after we liberated the deep mining camps in the Nevrak Basin. A young Serath child, skin pale from years in darkness, approached a human soldier. She couldn't have been more than 5 cycles old. She didn't speak. She just reached up, touched his scorched armor, and said softly, "You came." The soldier, big, grizzled, missing half an ear, knelt beside her. And through all the grime, he smiled. "Yeah," he whispered. "We did." Captain Morgan, though, was never one for sentiment. Even as victory loomed, she stayed focused, calculating. She didn't smile when news came in of a Skarn warlord defecting. She didn't cheer when we reclaimed the Valley of Temples, a sacred site we thought lost forever. Instead, she gathered us in the ruins of that valley and delivered one final command. "We don't stop until the last chain is broken," she said. "Not just for Serath, for every world that screamed and got silence in return." And so we didn't stop. In time, the Skarn Empire collapsed entirely. Some fled into uncharted systems, others begged for peace. We gave it, on our terms. No treaties, no councils, just a warning, spoken in 100 tongues. Never again. When it was truly over, when the last battlefield had gone quiet and the last gun had cooled, we stood among the rubble of our old capital. Rebuilding began slowly, stone by stone, seed by seed. But something had already been rebuilt inside us. We were no longer the people who begged for help. We were the people who answered the cries. As for the humans, they didn't stay. Once the war was done, they packed their gear and prepped their ships. They refused rewards. They declined monuments. Captain Morgan met with the new Serath Council, formed not from politicians, but from warriors and builders who had survived. "We'll come if you call again," she said, "but I don't think you'll need us next time." I asked her once why they really came. Out of all the worlds in the galaxy, why ours? She looked at me, eyes tired but fierce, and said, "Because once, we screamed into the void too. No one came for us. So we swore, if we ever heard that scream again, we'd be the ones to answer it." Then they left. Their ships vanished into the stars, leaving behind only footprints, fire-scarred armor, and stories that will echo for 1,000 generations. We begged the galaxy for help. Only humanity heard our cry. And they didn't come to save us. They came to teach us how to win.